Following total atomic annihilation, the rebuilding of this great nation of ours may fall to you. That's why we here at Vault Boys WV will take you on an oral tour of the beautiful state of West Virginia. There's no other place to be better prepared for the impending fallout. Now we go live to our team of experts.
Hello and welcome to yet another week with Vault Boys WV, a mutated podcast crossbreeding our shared history in Appalachia with a post-apocalyptic state in Fallout 76. I'm your country road scholar, Dave Chaffins, and joining me is the resident Fallout scribe, Tom from Fallout Lorecast. How you doing, Tom?
Hey, Dave. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm excited to have you. Tell me about what you're doing, what you're up to. What exactly is the Fallout Lorecast?
So the Fallout Lorecast is a project of mine that I launched the beginning of January. I really wanted to get it out before the holidays were done because I was like, well, I want to do let's go back to the beginning. I was like, I'm itching to do another kind of side project. I've got like a regular job and all that, and hadn't done anything for about a year. Started a new job. Then I was like, I should get some friends together and do a show about Fallout. That would be so fun. And then all of my friends who are like interesting, smart, busy people were just too busy. So that's kind of how it goes. And I was like, well, what can I do by myself? So I threw together this idea of like, well, some people touch on the lore and stuff every so often, but there's not really anybody that's taking it like in bite-sized chunks from the beginning and just kind of going through and defining each piece of the lore as you move forward and kind of filling in the blanks, I guess, for anybody who's starting the series later on, kind of jumping in, not from the beginning, which, a series that's now 20 something years old, you got a lot to learn, a lot to catch up on. So so that was my thing. I was trying to get it out before the holidays because I was like, well, the idea dawned on me just a few weeks before Christmas. I was like, this would be fun. I could do this. And then, I didn't get it out in time. I was like, yeah, I can get it out. Maybe people will be getting the game for Christmas and they'll want to look up new podcasts. Nope. So I put it out in January and been cranking out the episodes, trying to get them out there.
You've been doing really well. You've gotten on, I saw that you were on like the new and noteworthy or trending or something like that.
Yeah. The iTunes new and noteworthy picked it up.
There you go.
And I've gotten such a great response from people. People really, I kind of put it out there and I was like, well, I hope people like this because it was just me. Like I was super nervous putting up the microphone the first day. I was like, well, it's hard
to do it. In my opinion, doing it alone is very hard. There was one week where Austin had something going on. I hadn't booked anybody. I tried to do it alone and I sat there for 5 minutes and I was like, this is not the way this goes.
It's hard. It's like at first you're like, well, how do I have a conversation with nobody? And then you're like, well, okay, I'm technically having a conversation with an audience, and radio hosts have been doing this for 100 years now. So
years and years.
Yeah. So there's got to be a way to do it. So I just kind of sat there nervously and then hit the record button and started talking and went, nope. And then re-recorded and went, nope. And then re-recorded. And I was like, okay, this seems okay. And lo and behold, I've got a show. Actually, I've got two shows. I started a
you started a new one
too. Yeah, and so Elder Scrolls Lorecast, and
So you got the whole, you got everything on lockdown. Are you ready are you going to do like a Doom Lorecast, and then you're going to work into?
I was thinking about it. I was like, it's hard to do this stuff full time because it's, it's podcasting and you're going to get some audience, but, replacing your regular income is a very difficult thing to do. But
you're not going to get that with podcasting whatsoever.
It's tough. But, there's the part of me that's like, well, if ever that were to happen or I was to move on to a different show, I would probably jump into some other, there's so many game universes that are just so cool. And like, for example, you could do like the Witcher Lorecast.
Yeah, some guys good. I did a collab with they're called Lore Party. They do a lot of different they do different games, but their mainstay is Witcher. And so it's guys that, and it's I think more along the lines of like what your show is, where it's like very specific, very focused on this one thing, and it's maybe like two guys talking about very specific things.
Yeah, they're taking a topic and just dissecting that one thing.
Yeah. they had me on, and I like just started talking, and they made they had like they had the one episode that was like the 15-minute like conversation, and then they had a bonus episode that was like 45 minutes of me rambling on and on.
They just edited you into a second show.
Yes.
That's great.
You were like, well, we got this guy on here. So,
well, to be honest, that's where I started. That's what I was hoping to do was it really okay. So the actual core idea came from a friend of mine who had moved. Oh, so I'm over in Florida. You guys are up in West Virginia. A friend of mine moved all the way.
Here's a tidbit for you. Florida actually a part of Appalachia.
Because of the geography, because of the way the plate tectonics work or something. What's the word?
The Native American tribe outside of Tallahassee is the Appalachians.
Oh.
Which is what the mountain range is named after. And that's technically where that region begins, is right above Tallahassee.
So in the panhandle.
Yes.
In the panhandle. I don't know why I said it like that. Like it's fancy to live up there or something. It's definitely not. My brother lives up in that area. It's definitely not fancy to live up there. Awesome. Well, so anyway, the friend of mine moved out to the West Coast a number of years ago, and he and his wife were coming back in town to visit. And it was just one of those things of like, you know, when you get back together with a friend you haven't seen in years and you just like hit it off like nothing, no time passed.
Yeah, I know that exact feeling.
Yeah. And you're like, oh man, I wish I could have a reason to get together with a friend once a week and just have a conversation about something we enjoy together. What does that sound like? That sounds like a podcast. That'd be nice. Yeah. But then it never really happened. So I did my own thing.
Yeah. Well, that's important. That's kind of how me and Austin got started. Was we had been friends for years, and then really didn't see much of each other for 4 or 5 years. And then he ended up like 1 minute he was like, let's go out to dinner. Cause he still lived in West Virginia. And he was like, let's go out to dinner. And then it was like, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to maybe move out here. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it was like a week later, he literally moved a block away from me.
Oh, geez. I'm back.
Yep.
Wow.
So it became a lot more simple to do all that.
Yeah.
So, Tom, give me a little bit of background on where, like, Fallout, what you think about it, where you started with it, what was the first game you played, that history. I want to know, like, from the very beginning to where we are now.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I wish I could say I started at Fallout 1, but I think
everybody wishes they could be that cool, you know?
I know, right? And the thing is that, like, I could have been that cool, but I think that was the year I started college. So I'm a bit older than you guys. And my priorities at the time were like, you know, like going to philosophy club and meeting all the girls and like not spending time in front of my computer so that I could actually like have a life away at college and meet people and do stuff. Right. So
I understand. The only real game that I played a lot of in college was Skyrim. And that was because everybody that I lived with, we literally were all in the GameStop line at midnight for that release.
Yeah.
We all had it. It was like everywhere on the TVs in the fraternity house that we were in. It was all over the place.
Man, that's interesting. Yeah, we didn't. So in the late 90s, you didn't even have good Ethernet on campus. Like it was all locked down with. You couldn't even play Quake or Counter-Strike from one computer to another computer in like another dorm building. Like it just, it was terrible. So I was like, well, I'm not going to play any online games.
There's not much.
Yeah. But that's interesting. You bring up Skyrim. So the connection, I guess you could say, is if it's the Bethesda part of the Fallout stuff with like Fallout 3, and it goes back to a curiosity about Morrowind. And reading like video game magazines at the time, because this was like the early 2000s, right? Where magazines were still a thing, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And then being fascinated with it and trying, I don't know if I tried the demo or if I just was like a terrible human being and just like downloaded it off of some share thing, or I don't remember, but I just totally
LimeWire.
Yeah, it was one of those probably. And I just totally bounced off the beginning of the game and was like, this is weird. And I can't hit the squirrel in front of me with my sword. What's going on? And then when Oblivion came out, there was all the hype about it with the new consoles, and then I jumped into that, and I was like, holy crap. I remember specifically going to visit my parents, and they were like, what's new? And I was like, well, I've been playing a video game, which is a weird conversation to have. Like, well, what's going on in your life? Well, this video game is notable. It's worth bringing up. But, my dad was the kind of guy who got me into like the Lord of the Rings and had like an original copy of the Hobbit and like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling him, I was like, you know what, this is the first game that I feel like I'm actually entering into a world where I'm just kind of lost in the world and lost in the lore. And I don't know what to expect around the next corner because it doesn't follow necessarily all the fantasy tropes that you would expect. Like when I first got vampirism in Oblivion, I didn't even know vampires were a thing. I know I came across some kind of vampire-y looking dudes. Yeah, like in a cave, and I contracted some sort of blood disease. But like once I started changing into a vampire and having weird dreams and stuff, I was like, wait a minute, I'm a vampire. What? Do I have to stay a vampire? Is there a cure? Like, what am I going to do? It was like a real dilemma. Like, this is weird. I have to figure this out. So yeah, immediately I became like a Bethesda fan. And then the announcement that Fallout 3 was coming out, and I was like, Fallout, huh? And I was like, I never really tried those out. And there was like the big hubbub with the real Fallout fans who were like, how could you do Fallout as a first person game and blah 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 blah. Bethesda's going to mess it up. And then lo and behold, it comes out and it's like awesome, and everyone's like, no, this is really good, you guys nailed it. And then New Vegas is like, oh, surprise, there's another one coming out just like really quick. And then
immediately almost
immediately. And it also happens to be by some of the same guys who worked on the originals, and it's even more awesome. And I was like, what? So yeah, from that point on, I was hooked. So I guess that's a long answer. I mean, hey, we're rambling. It's a podcast, right?
Well, no, it's a podcast, man.
Yeah.
The Fallout 3 is I think still a really fantastic game. You had mentioned though that you had your dad had a first edition of The Hobbit, and it's funny because like that's how I was introduced to fantasy worlds. Is my grandmother was an English teacher, and she had a first edition. It was a paperback. It wasn't like a hardbound copy.
Right. Yeah.
It was a first edition paperback from like way back when. Yeah. And she gave that to me, and she was like, I think it was for maybe a holiday or something, and gave it to me, and she was like, here you go. Yeah, and I fell in love with that, and that whole like fantasy and that adventure setting. Like I had never experienced that before. Yeah,
and as a kid, I was like, I guess there's a few different things that happen that make you realize that your parents are like interesting individuals rather than just your mom and your dad. Like the things that hint similar to like these games. The things that hint at like a backstory that's more interesting than the thing you just happen to see in front of you. And I was like, he's like, these are cool. He really likes these. He has them on a shelf. I ended up inheriting them. And I remember being a kid in like elementary school, I hated reading. And it wasn't because it was hard. It was because I just always felt like children's books were treating me like a child. And you know that feeling you get when you're a kid where like adults talk down to you like you're a child, and you know that that's what they're doing?
Yeah, you reach that point where it's like, okay, this is annoying to me now.
Right. You're like, just because I'm a kid doesn't mean you have to talk to me like I'm an idiot. Like, just talk to me like I'm a person, right? And I felt like books were doing that until I decided to read The Hobbit in 5th grade because I had to choose a book. I was like, they're like, you're going to read a book this year, pick a book. And so I was like, I'll read The Hobbit. And they were like, okay. And that's got these like old timey words, and it was written in like British English, and
right. And it starts off with songs and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's songs and poems, and it's super dense, especially for a 5th grader. And I was like, I don't know what thither is, but I want to go hither and thither. Like that sounds cool. So yeah, it completely grabbed me because it gave me this sense of like the unknown. That the full sum of the world was not within the pages of this book, which was something I'd never experienced before, especially as a child. You're like, no, the whole world is right here in this book. That's all there is. Nope, not with that. So,
I like that adventuring aspect, and I think that's one of the better. Like as far as like a novel itself, I think that's one of the better examples of like what the adventure and the hero's journey is, and how the story beats work and how they play out. Because like The Hobbit, I think The Hobbit is just in my personal opinion a better book than any of the Lord of the Rings books, because it's just a little more cohesive across the board. Not to say that the Lord of the Rings aren't cohesive, but there's a lot more descriptors in those that it's like they're more of like a tour of the world in some of the chapters. Yes.
I actually reread The Hobbit recently with my 8-year-old son, and it's always so interesting to reread a book. You know, it had been a decade since I read it, and it had probably been in a decade before that I wrote it before. But to just get a newer understanding of like what I'm reading through different eyes, and it was super interesting to see like some of the things I didn't notice about the book before, like the way that the beginning and the way that the end of the book, the tone is completely different. Like in the beginning, it starts off as like a children's fantasy, and you have the silliness of the door showing up at the door, and like all of it almost feels more like a cartoon. And then by the end, you're in this massive battle with bloodshed and like real like adult topics, about like, bravery and honesty and being faithful to another person and holding a vow and like all of these themes. And it's like similar to Bilbo's journey in the story. He grows up throughout the story, but the book also does too. The way the book is written gets older. It's, I don't know. It was just one of those things that really stood out to me. I was like, by the end of this, it's completely a different thing. It really genuinely takes you from one place to another place, which is amazing, because I think that was kind of the idea. There and back.
I there and back again. Yeah. You're exactly right. So it obviously, like, both you and I have this, like, it seems like we both have this understanding that probably like games that base their story and their gameplay off of adventure are probably some of our favorite games out there.
Yeah.
I go so far as to say that.
Yeah. I like when there's hidden depth, when there's adventure, when there's some sort of journey. I enjoy lighter fare too. It's fun to jump into something like Overwatch and cap people in the head a few times and then log off. But the ones that really stay with me are the deeper story type ones.
So you've launched your podcast around the same time as a rather big Fallout game has come out. And so I kind of wanted to get your impression of what did you think of the announcement? What, obviously something with that to kind of probably influenced you to start the podcast. And so I kind of want to get your impressions of announcement, the release, and I kind of want to talk to you about if you've been playing it and what you're up to in it.
Yeah. I think it was nice to have a surprise back at, what was it? It was E3 last year when they do all their big announcements and they're like, surprise, we're coming out with a game again. Kind of like they did with Fallout 4.
Right.
And that was nice, because I was like completely not expecting another Fallout game. I knew that Starfield was in the works. I knew that they were planning to do another Elder Scrolls eventually, but everything had been kind of quiet about Fallout. So I was like, okay.
We'd figured that Fallout 4 was so like it was so big. I mean, it seemed like they put a lot of budget and a lot of marketing and a lot of different stuff in it. You figured, okay, well, they didn't do a Skyrim like 2, right after they did Elder Scrolls, so they're probably just going to do 4 and move on.
Right, and it became very clear that it was like, well, they're not outsourcing something to Obsidian to do another New Vegas type second game. So we're probably not going to get much. And then all of a sudden there was this announcement. They're like, hey, this is coming. It's going to be different. It's going to be multiplayer. So, be ready. And I was like, that's great. And my wife loves Fallout stuff to the point where I got her like the Fallout loot crate when it came out for like,
oh yeah,
that was her Christmas gift for the year. Basically was like loot crates all year.
Sly dog.
Yeah. And when the shirts didn't fit, I got to inherit them. So that was nice too.
There you go. Easy trade-off.
Yeah. So multiplayer, I'm like, my wife and I can play Fallout together without having to just like pass a controller back and forth. This is great. So I got super excited about that. And then the next notable thing was when they put out the announcement like the week or two before the beta test. And they were like, hey, this isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be bugs. Just bear with us. And immediately everyone was like, what? And, you and I, I'm sure, were like, well, yeah, no, duh. It's a Bethesda game on the creation engine. Of course it's going to have bugs. Like, that's just...
I remember when the DLC, The Pit, released on Fallout 3, and then everything turned into big yellow exclamation points.
Oh, yeah. Like textures were missing, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was like, no, at the time I was like, this is probably smart of them. I work at a digital marketing firm. And I remember bringing this up to some of my friends at the company. I was like, this is probably smart of them to get ahead of this, but the game comes out. It's not what people expect. It's kind of not fully baked. And there was a whole lot of pushback against that. But I think and this is kind of, I've talked about this on my show a little bit. I don't want to dwell on the negatives of these things because ultimately I'm not rooting for the company to fail. I'm not rooting for this to be a bad game.
Of course. Yeah.
Even if a year from now, even if it takes another year for the game to really get itself together and turn into what it really should be, that's still a win. It's just a win a year from now. Yeah.
I think that there's a big... Like you're seeing, like with Battle Royale, these live service games are kind of, you've got Destiny, you've got The Division, you've got Anthem. Like you see these companies trying to stake their claim. I think that people saw that and they said, okay, Bethesda's out here staking our claim. We are in general displeased with the state of how that development works, what that stuff is done, and then on top of that, you have the normal bugs, like literally these same bugs from Fallout 4 there. And I think people like it got into that media cycle where it was like exciting it was fun to be outraged at this thing. Now Anthem is out, so everybody can be outraged at Anthem. And I'm sure there's going to be something wrong with The Division when it comes out, and then they can all be mad at that. Like it's a part of a cycle, and it's like No Man's Sky, and then in a year or two, like they come back and they're like, here's what we're doing in this new big update, and then people catch on to that and they look back at the other stuff that they've done in previous updates and they're like, oh, wait a second, this game might actually be worth my time now. And then it's, because everybody likes an underdog and a redemption story. Sure. I think I mentioned the philosophy club earlier. I was a philosophy major in school and in college. And I think I try to think multiple steps into every problem. And one of the things I've noticed about this pattern of like the internet gets raged about something, things move on, or it's very similar to the problem of like comment spam or forums degrading into terrible stuff, or the chat in a Twitch channel turning into just a mess of people writing stupid crap and flaming things. And I think the root of all of that is the internet gives everybody the same amount of voice. And because the internet gives everybody the same amount of voice, the average age of the person using the internet is way lower than anything we assume. So, and this isn't to be mean to like younger people, but if younger people are anything like me, and I was bored and 16 years old or 13 years old or whatever, and I had access to the internet the way we do today, I'd be saying all sorts of stupid crap because, I didn't care. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think it really had any real effect on the world. And I think that's part of what we just don't really take into consideration is a lot of that negativity is driven by an audience that is just younger and responds to that because they're angsty kids who are just looking to be upset about something, Right. And I think there's a lot of trend following, and they tend to. I mean, you see it, and not to like, knock on the same like Fortnite door again. But you see that trend work with like battle royale games. So if they go from this to that, and then there's a whole like a meme and a cultural sense behind it, like not just like a funny little picture in it, but like a cultural meme that goes with kids. I mean, you see it from the kids that were playing Minecraft or playing Fortnite now. Like you see that kind of like dynamic change and move through. And
right. Yeah,
when you have that, I guess that kind of progression is as you go. Like they're already so engaged with this media. They already have stuff. They're seeing people put out their opinions that like it's been there on YouTube from day one. Whereas, you know, I'm even from a generation where I grew up with dial-up internet. So we didn't like have like Adobe Flash Player worked maybe for like what we were looking at on Newgrounds to play Flash games with.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And so with this kind of like give and receive culture, like when you grow up in a world where it's like commonplace to go to a YouTube video and put first as a comment, like you're more open to voicing, I think, your opinions more freely on the internet.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it ties into that. So it's you just have to take it with a grain of salt and just kind of say, well, okay, so there are those of us who are I won't say it's an age thing, because there are definitely some teens who are more mature than that, but let's just say of a more mature mindset who are willing to say, all right, well, the company made some mistakes, you know, like the marketing department messed up a bit, the company, the part of the department of the company that does the bags messed up a bit, you know, it's fine. It's fine. They're going to make those mistakes. They're going to get like lash out from the community, from the consumers, and they're going to have to change. And if they don't, that's just going to get worse. Like everything either breaks or gets fixed. It's one or the other, right?
Yep.
That's it. And so you go, well, okay, let's give it time and see which one happens. And my hope is that the things get fixed. And the only way things get fixed is by calling out the bad stuff, but then also praising the good stuff and saying,
right. Like, you kind of have to have that. And that's with any live game or active development. I mean, in the state, like if you're beta testing any kind of application, like there's got to be that give and take and that feedback and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I guess to get back to more of your initial,
I want to kind of hear your personal experience in Fallout 76.
Yeah. So I enjoy the good storyline stuff. I'm not particularly upset about not having, you know, NPCs and like conversation dialogue trees and things like that. That doesn't bother me too much about this one, because one of the things that I've come to love the most about the Fallout series is the environmental storytelling and the idea of novel and new things in each release. So, you know, like the things that were in New Vegas that weren't in 3, you know, like, oh, what are these gecko things? Or what are these other guns that I didn't have before? Or these groups of raiders that I'd never heard of, you know? And then to 4 and going, oh, the power armor works differently in this one. That's really cool. Or, you know, like, oh, this is a different kind of laser rifle than I've seen before. You know, like that, you know, the world looks different. This is interesting. So the fact that it's a much larger map full of more new content and really interesting environmental storytelling, I think is a step in the right direction, because that if they keep expanding on that stuff, I think that's great, because I like to just get lost in the world and find a building and go, what happened here? You know, and then put the context clues together and go, oh, you know, like, oh, that's what happened here. Okay, cool.
Right. That's what interests me, is that kind of like in the future, like that kind of like episodic structure that they're doing, like with a roadmap and everything, of like they're starting to trickle out these details and this information, and we're going to get a little bit of that, and then we're going to wonder about like, oh, this gives us a clue to this or that, and then for example, in episode 2, they come out, they're like, okay, you know, we have this, and it's like, oh, okay, that explains what I was thinking about earlier.
Right. Oh, this is what's going on in that vault with the worshippers. Ooh, okay. Yep. That's what's going on with the weird red tree vines. Like, what's the actual core of that? We don't really know. You know, people are speculating, but we don't really know. You know, and even things like, you know, the Scorched Plague is kind of the main focus of the main story, but there's other stuff going on out there. Like I just did an episode about super mutants. The super mutants in this one come from the FEV strain that was shared with them from the Mariposa location, but they're different. These super mutants are different than the ones in Fallout 4, from the ones in Fallout 1 and 2. Like one of the things that I thought was super interesting once I actually dug into the research in Fallout 3, you know how you come across those like behemoth, like giant super mutants?
Yeah.
Those, the story reason for that is that their cell replication continues on as they age. So those ones are just older. They just keep getting bigger. The fact that there's behemoths in Appalachia is because there's something that goes wrong with the mutation and triggers an enlarging in size. So they're kind of opposites in a way. One of them is the mutation continuing on the right path. The other is some sort of trigger that breaks the way it's working and causes a change. So that's, who knows? Maybe that's something that's going to come up. I don't know, but it creates like differences in each of the games and explains a little bit more, which I think goes into the topic about like people getting all upset about like, well, this breaks the lore, la 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 la. And it's like, well, no, it's a new place with other things that were going on in a world that's very big that just hasn't been discussed yet. So give the people some room to develop content around a new place, like, right. It's okay.
Like, it's not going to be like, you're not going to have this. I know. The people, I think at the beginning when they were talking about the revelation that the Brotherhood of Steel was there, they were like, yeah, the Brotherhood of Steel they didn't do
they weren't over there that early in the history of the games. And it's like, well, there could be reasons why they were. We just haven't seen it yet. And then
you play the game and you learn. I mean, you experience that storyline. It makes sense. You kind of get even more background on the original Brotherhood, which you really only know between like what people talk about in 1, 2 and tactics and 3 and 4. Like you only get that background based on people that weren't there. And this one, you're like actually hearing the voices of these people for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's really interesting is you could use, I feel like people are upset because it happens earlier in the story from the games that they're more familiar with. Mm-hmm. So they're like, it feels like it's retro. What's the word? Retconned. It feels like it's retconned in. But had this been a Fallout that existed 300 years since the Great War, and the same reason for there being the Brotherhood over there was that they were in communication with people over on the West Coast. And there was some relationship to the Brotherhood leader on the West Coast through a connection and whatever, they'd be completely fine with that. Yeah. And it's like, well, does it matter where it happens in the storyline? Both things are new information that somebody had to invent because it's a video game, like somebody had to write the information.
Why can't we talk about all who designed all the raiders look the same essentially,
right? Yeah,
it's like they all have a very similar motive. They're all referred to as raiders. It's like, who came up with that?
Yeah,
the bottle caps. I mean, it's just it's a part of the game. Right, totally. Like you're not going to make a Fallout game without some of the mainstays. Like you're not going to have one without the Brotherhood of Steel because the Brotherhood of Steel power armor is essentially on every box art that's shipped for the game.
Right.
Ever.
Sure. Totally. Yeah. There's certain iconographic. I don't know words tonight.
Iconographic. Yeah, that's fine.
Iconographic details that have to get, shared between the things in order to feel cohesive. Like it's part of the same world. But yeah, that's a great question. Like, why would two distinctly different communities on two separate, thousands of miles away from each other, both decide that they're going to use bottle caps as a money source?
Right. I mean,
it's silly.
It's like realistically, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Somewhere somebody's probably still using cash because it's not like you can't find old cash around. You do.
My favorite Reddit thread I've read recently was somebody said had posted, and it was like maybe it didn't have very many upvotes, but it was like, why can't the 10mm submachine gun have a silencer? And somebody else commented, and they were like, listen, man, I've got a 10mm submachine gun, and there are no silencers for it. Like, you just can't have a silencer for it. Like, I've got one in real life, and it's fine. And somebody commented back to them. They were like, okay, but do you have a laser rifle? Like this is not a real world setting. Like nobody knows how laser rifles work or plasma rifles.
Right. Well, aliens in the real world are like this.
Right. It's like they don't have the glowing eyes. It's like,
when I met the Mothman, he didn't look exactly like a moth like he does in the game.
Right, and you can literally go to the Mothman Museum and see the quote the drawings of the people that have seen Mothman, and they all look different.
Right, yeah. As with any cryptid, it's all
right,
subjective to the individual.
Right.
Yeah, and the culture at the time. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, we can. This is funny because this has become like, let's complain about people saying dumb things about the game.
Well, it's more or less, having the lore guy, what I would consider between probably you and Oxhorn as kind of the guys that are really contributing to the overall lore of Fallout and really, breaking it down and making it consumable for, even for reminders or for people in the game that want to learn more, that are just now picking up a game or, starting their first time.
Uh-huh.
I expected that it was going to kind of devolve into that. That was
yeah. Well, thank you.
An expectation in my brain.
Yeah, thank you for the. I think Oxhorn is great. I mean, he clearly puts way more time into this stuff than I do, and it was some of an inspiration for me. In fact, I think I even quote or mention some of his stuff in the second episode I do. Mm-hmm. So if anyone's listening right now, you should go if you really, 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 really want the deep stuff. Like go watch his playthroughs and stuff because they're so good. Yeah, I mentioned in the beginning of my show that I'm not the expert. I don't know everything. Like I've got my experiences in the games, and I do research before each episode in order that dotting my I's and crossing my T's. But that does not mean that like in a moment's notice I'm going to remember or know a thing, or even have experienced it. Like I'm very upfront about it. I started with Fallout 3. I didn't play 1 and 2. I've kind of monkeyed around in the beginnings of those games, just see what they're like. But I had to watch replays, and yeah, at this point, those games are so dense and the technology feels so old to me that, and I'm sure this is going to set some people off, but I have a really hard time making myself go back and dealing with an interface from 20 years ago. It's tough. That
was the hardest thing for me, like, because they were released for free. If you had pre-ordered Fallout 76, if you had a Bethesda account, and you bought it, I think before the end of 2018, you could go back and play this. And so I went back and gave the first one a try, and I was like, okay, I get it. I've heard the second one is better. I heard that they really got in, and the story is better. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And
I went and played that, and I got to Vault City, and I was like, okay, I understand. I'm with it. I see how this game works. I already know most of the story because I spent most of my time in Fallout 3 trying to figure out what was going on and looking up articles on the internet or something like that. Mm-hmm. Try to figure out the lore behind it. So I don't need that refresher, but I appreciate the classic style of all of that.
Yeah, it definitely has a time and place, right?
Yes, mm-hmm. For
sure.
So what's your play style? So like you've been playing Fallout 76. What's your play style? Like what kind of build of a character do you have? Are you kind of like a little bit of everything? Do you have a certain gun or weapon that you favor? How are you playing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first character I built, I went my typical route. And I guess you could say it's like the stereotypical Bethesda route of like sneaky sniper kind of thing, because everybody in Skyrim ends up going like a sneaky assassin with a bow.
Right. So that's the running joke.
Yeah. So I'm the Fallout equivalent of that. So I've got my, very early on when I realized that the super mutants and the scorched drop rifles, and that you could break down the rifles and get the upgrades. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to build a sniper rifle, and that's just all there is to it, So that became my first thing, and I was like, okay, let's go with the perk cards that make me, a ninja. So either, from a distance or up close, I can still sneak up on things, take them out really easily. So that's usually my go-to thing. And strangely enough, there's such a predominance of power armor, especially for like the later game builds in this one, that I carry it with me. I bring it around just when I need it, but for most of the time I don't use it. I'm not one of those guys who runs around
I like to
the whole
think
time.
it's almost like you don't need, once you get the full power armor, you don't really need a hazmat suit anymore.
Yeah.
It's more like for when I know that like something is happening, I'm going to put this on. I've been playing, my second character has been Sneaky Vats build, and maybe I'm at level 29 or something now. But when I got power armor, I was like, okay, for my other build, I use power armor the whole time, and I've got like a big axe, and I'm essentially like Doom guy without the shotgun.
Right.
I run at things, I hit them really hard, and I walk away. Yeah, but for this one, it's different. So I understand it's like, is it really worth it because they got to do the whole animation to get into it, and then you got to walk around, your speed decreases.
It feels kind of cramped too, even from just like an interface, because you can see like the screen, the overlay changes, the UI. You know, it's just it even in your stompier and things, and I'd rather sneak up on things and hit them, and then they don't know I'm there, and their heads pop off or whatever, and then I'm like, all right, I'm good. Keep moving. Now I get a lot of trouble because of that too when things surround me. That's why I keep the power armor on. So in a moment where I really need it, it's kind of my, my oh crap,
your go-to.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, put it out, get in quick. Okay, good.
Yep.
Yeah. But I created a second character, and the second character, not only did I want to do a different build, but I wanted to role play a character a little bit more. And that's kind of what I did with Skyrim. Years ago, like this was about a little over 4.5 years ago, I really gave the whole Twitch, like, let's see if I can get a channel up. Let's see if I can actually build an audience kind of thing going.
Right. And
I spent about 6 months streaming 6 nights a week, 4 to 6 hours every night in the evenings after a full-time job, which was, just like, I'm sure lots of people have tried this, and it was a lot of work, but I've
done research on that because people have continually asked us if we do Twitch, do we do Twitch?
Yeah.
And I looked at, it's like, I've got a wife, I've got dogs, it's like, there's a kid in my future.
Yeah.
I've got other hobbies outside of this. It is a grind to do that. It really is.
Yeah. If you can't make it full time and do that as a job, then it better be fun, and it better be just the thing you'd rather be doing with your time, because it takes so much time. So one of the things I had the most fun doing back in the day was role playing a character in Skyrim. And the Twitch viewers and I came up with rules that he had to play by. Like, he was obviously a kleptomaniac, because everybody in those games is a kleptomaniac. But he was also afraid of horses, so I couldn't fast travel. And every time I came across a horse, I had to go, oh no, and then I had to like walk the long way around.
That's funny.
And I couldn't get close to it. So
there's kind of like a D&D aspect to that,
Yeah, yeah. And it was a lot of fun, especially with a community that, watching and commenting and, sharing ideas, and the character became more complex as things went on. We'd get these other ideas about, like, oh, well, clearly they would make this decision because that's the kind of person they are. And so it would affect the way the story played out. So I decided, I've been streaming a little bit in the evenings as kind of a way to help promote the podcast, but more of just having other people to play games with and like hang out. It's really less about like actually building a big community and trying to make any money off of it, and more about just like, hey, it's fun. It's an opportunity to hang out with some friends and chat with people while I play video games.
Right. That's why I've put out my PSN. I didn't do it at release because I figured then if people were listening to it, like, then everybody would add me and I'd have like this massive amount of friends or something. So I did it like a month after release. That way it's like, okay, if these people are still listening to this podcast and playing the game, then they're going to be the ones that like,
they're worth hanging out.
That are in it for the long haul,
Yeah.
Most of those guys that I play with, it's like full-time jobs, have kids, like everything, which is kind of nice because we're all kind of in the same boat as far as time.
Yeah, it has to be evenings. It's like you can't log on at 2 PM because you're like, how can you play at 2 PM? Like, what are you doing with your life? Like, don't you have responsibilities and like a day job? What's going on? Yeah, I feel the same way. And so the people I get to play with or just hang out with, it happens to be in the evenings when I've got a few hours to, the kids in bed and I've done with all my stuff I need to do for the day. So my wife and I are just sitting around trying to, pass the time with playing games or watching a show or something. So why not hang out with
So tell me about
So
tell me about your build that you've got going on for the second character.
Yeah. So the second character, all of that was to say I built a second character, and I wanted to go in a different direction from the first one with the sneaky sniper thing. I wanted to go mostly melee and eventually get to the point where I'm using power armor a lot and that kind of thing. And stray away from firearms as much as I could. But then eventually I decided, you know what, I should at least have a go-to gun in a situation where I just need to hit things at a distance, because Scorch Beasts are tough to hit with an axe all the time, you know, that kind of thing. So I came up with Derek and decided I was going to role play this character and give him like personality reasons why he was who he is. So Derek is the quintessential, like, let's call him 13-year-old kid who grew up with like helicopter parents who also didn't trust him with anything. He lived in a bubble, in a literal bubble, because he lived in a vault. So he's super naive about the world. And then all of a sudden, this is the way the game starts, everyone's just gone, right? Everyone left the vault. Right. And poor Derek gets left there. And he's like, you know, let's say he's 20 now, right? And he's like, I guess I should go out into the world and figure things out. So he's like naive and optimistic. He's not the most masculine dude in the world, but he just knows how to hit things because nobody's ever trained him in firearms. So he can't even use a gun if he was to pick one up. And he's got like the little itty bitty mustache because he needs to prove that he can grow facial hair. Just for his own like well-being.
There you go.
Emotional well-being. And he's a good clean boy. Like, he can't get past this idea of like the wasteland is a dirty place and you're never going to get a shower. So every time he comes across soap or toilet paper, he has to pick it up.
There you go. Now you're working it in. I like that.
Yeah. So there's all these like, he's got these like personality quirks. And then I got to a place where he came across his first laser rifle, and Derek was like, oh man, a laser rifle. And so of course he had to learn to shoot a laser rifle, and he didn't blow his thumbs off. So success. So he gets into all sorts of trouble. He's super naive. He's way too trusting of other people, but you know, it leads into these interesting situations.
And so you've been playing him on your Twitch channel? Yeah.
I've been streaming him. He's kind of my go-to stream character because he's somebody that like people can make comments about or say,
you can have like a connection.
Yeah. Or like I'll see a situation and I'll go, guys, what would Derek do in this situation? And sometimes they know the character better than I do. And they're like, Derek would totally go in there and introduce himself. I was like, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. He would. Even though I, as the gamer, know that that's a terrible idea. And Derek will walk in and then I'll use the voice chat and go, hey guys, I'm Derek. What's your name? And everybody just goes, huh? And like, especially if it's other players, you know, they're like, what? And I came across two players one time and I was in like a rundown, and I got in the house and was like looking through stuff, and then they showed up, and this guy runs in and he goes, hey, hold on, just wait right there. Wait right there. I'm gonna drop some stuff in a bag. I'm not duping anything. Don't worry about it. I'm just gonna drop some stuff. I got a lot of stuff. I'm gonna make your day, because I was like a level 12 character at the time or something. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And he jumps up on top of like a desk, and I'm like, and he was like standing on a recipe, and I'm like, you're gonna get that recipe all dirty. I was about to pick it up. And he's like, what? And I'm like, never mind. You want something to drink? I think I've got some stuff upstairs. And I go upstairs and I start looking for like drinks. And Derek doesn't drink alcohol. He doesn't do drugs. And he's like, well, the clean boy. Yeah, he's a good clean boy. And I was like, the only thing I can find is some whiskey. You drink whiskey? There you go. Trying to host it as if he's in my house. Yeah, it was.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good time.
Situations. Yeah, it's pretty good. So that's how I play Derek. That's my other build. But he's primarily going to be like melee power, kind of.
Well, in the style of what we're going through and going on. So this next week, this is, I think, airing on Wednesday. We are coming up on the first iteration of the new season with Fallout 76.
Yeah.
And so this has been the first update is which came via Inside the Vault through their roadmap, and they kind of detailed it a little bit more, is now alcohol brewing and distilling has its own dedicated crafting bench and quests associated with that coming out.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for that. Obviously, as somebody who uses my main character is power armor and strength build, and strength automatically correlates with your melee weapons and increases damage as you go through.
Yeah, dude. When you were talking early, this was a few months back, but about your strength build with drinking and then cannibalizing bodies and how all that stuff, that was great. I was like, that's so brilliant. I immediately went home and was like, I'm going to be a cannibal with my main. I'm going to start eating people. Yeah. It's
all about that cycle. It's funny to go through, it's kind of like I don't know, that first playthrough was a lot similar to like the first time you play like a Souls game or like Bloodborne or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you don't know the systems. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's viable. And so you kind of have to improvise with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the brilliance of that first playthrough with it is, it's like, okay, with the stealth character, it's like I've got my perks lined out of what level I'm getting what, and I've got kind of everything planned because I have a particular build in mind. With that first one, it was like learning everything, and so it just,
what happens if I do this? Oh, that can connect to this thing. Okay, I guess I'll try that.
It started with almost a blank slate, and then like the character itself, by virtue of the universe, became this like disgusting person.
Yes. And that's part of what I want to do with Derek too, is that he starts out as an optimist, but like the world just progressively gets darker and darker and he starts to cave. So maybe with the distilling and the brewing, he like, I think maybe he doesn't get into drinking it himself, but he starts like making it and pushing it on other people. I think that might be his next step in his evolution.
Maybe he takes like one sip and he's like, like when you're like maybe like that, like you're 18, I don't know what when people start drinking.
Right.
When you're 18, you have like you're like, oh man, I'm gonna be real badass and have a Corona,
or you have
like, oh, I'm so cool.
Yeah, or you have your first sip of like actual hard liquor and you're like, oh, whoa, oh, that burns.
Yep.
Yeah. Derek's gonna have to go through some growing up, I think.
That's great. That's excellent. Well, Tom, I want to thank you particularly for coming on and joining me. It's so much fun to sit down and have a conversation. We'll have to do this again. Now that we're all caught up and got everything together.
So I had one. I have one question for you because I've been super excited to get on the show and talk with you because I really like your show, first of all. Secondly, you guys are experts on West Virginia and that stuff. So the other thing that Derek is trying to figure out is, you know the song that they use, the Take Me Home Country Roads in the ads?
I'm not familiar with that song whatsoever. I'm just kidding.
So
yes, I'm with it.
Right. So there's the line in the song, where's it go? Take me home, country roads, to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, right? Well, Derek heard the song and was like, what's a mountain mama? So he's been on a quest to find his mountain mama. And I'm just wondering if you have any insight into what might be Derek's mountain mama. Where should he go look?
Where should he go look?
For his mountain mama. I mean, he's tried cuddling up with super mutants. That didn't work so great.
I think that I've got an answer for this. So, like historically, like Appalachia is a very, and we'll get a little bit philosophical here. Appalachia is a birthplace of culture. So I think that and there's research and there's a lot of different stuff that goes into this, but just the not only the geology, but the geography of the region creates culture that's very similar to why like you had people from Scotland and stuff settle here is because it was very like they were used to the geography. They were used to this. And
the rocky hills, the highlands, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when they talk about Mountain Mama, I think it's almost more literal in the mountain sense. Like it's the what mountain was I raised on in West Virginia? It was River Mountain. Like that's
the mountain
like
is your mother, right?
Right. The mountain is your mother. And so for Derek, I would say that maybe his Mountain Mama is the mountain that Vault 76 is on.
He's going to go full circle. He's going to explore the whole map, and then he's going to return home feeling defeated, and then it's going to dawn on him.
That's my Mama Murphy insight for.
Oh man, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I think at some point his quest has to come back to the end. Man, this went full circle like the freaking Hobbit. He's going to have to like do his journey and then return home one day to the vault.
Right.
And standing in front of the vault feels like, well, I didn't learn anything. And then all of a sudden it's going to dawn on him and go, no, this is where I belong. This is my Mountain Mama. Oh, that's brilliant.
Well, that's what, and I mean, that's the whole idea of how they wrote that song is this guy was living outside. And this was for Maryland. It was a song about Maryland. Like the descriptors and everything are similar to Maryland. Uh-huh. Actually, even like geographically similar to Virginia proper. But and people from West Virginia will hate that I say Virginia proper, but I was technically born in West Virginia, but I lived in Virginia for like 18 years or 22 years. So anywho, he was writing it about coming home to a family reunion and like revisiting this place that he grew up in that hadn't been to in years. So that's kind of the idea. And it's like, and that's why you hear it at funerals is because these people like are religiously going home to God. You hear it a lot at funerals. You hear it a lot on road trips, at football games, because everybody's there together. Like it's more of like it's a song about family and the region associated with it. So
got it.
My insight for Derek.
Awesome. Well, Derek will appreciate this. I'm gonna have to figure out how to put all this together on the stream. Maybe I should like just do a whole YouTube series on like the adventures of Derek. Yeah.
The adventures. Yes. I like that. That's excellent.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, thank you for answering my question.
Well, no problem, Tom. Tom, where can people find you at?
I am on the Twitter at Fallout Lorecast. You can also send me emails, falloutlorecast@gmail.com. Or if you want to hang out and experience some of the adventures of Derek, you're welcome to join me on twitch.tv/Fallout Lorecast, which eventually I think I'm going to just switch to Robots Radio because that's the greater brand with all the Lorecast shows and whatever else I happen to do. So at some point I'm going to update it. But right now it's twitch.tv/Fallout Lorecast.
That was the original trappings for Vault Boys WV, was because it's like, man, that's pretty specific. And so I was like, do we need to change the brand? And I thought, you know what? No, we don't need to change the brand. I don't need to do that. It's like everybody that's listening is familiar with Fallout 76, and if we want to talk about something else, we certainly can.
Yeah, it's tricky. Branding questions are tricky. Yeah.
Yep. I'm sure working for a digital marketing firm, you understand that.
Yeah, I never think about it. Just like you've never heard that song. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, Tom, I want to thank you again for coming on. If you all are wondering about certain particulars about Fallout lore, if you're looking for information, you want that podcast form, go check out Fallout Lorecast. It's a great show. I've listened to a few episodes. It's really fantastic in that you combine not only your own narrative, but clips from the game and music and different stuff that's happening. It's really well edited.
Thanks, dude.
That's one of my favorite things about it. But as far as this podcast, that's it for today. Don't forget to email us your questions at vaultboyswv@gmail.com. Check us out on social media at VaultBoysPod and tell your friends. The best way to support the show is a rate and review on iTunes, which we are always grateful for. Just remember, from holler to highway, we've got you covered 6 ways to Sunday.